"This is filthy. Are you blind?" Amanda, the janitorial supervisor, shouted aggressively at Jordan, the new black janitor, her voice cutting to the sterile hum of Kingsley Enterprises, echoing off the glass walls and sleek chrome fixtures of the lobby. Jordan glanced at the polished glass he had just cleaned, his reflection staring back at him, and said calmly, without hesitation, "I just cleaned it." Amanda's face twisted into fury, her hand reaching for a full cup of coffee on the nearby table. And without warning, she hurled it across the counter. The dark liquid arced through the air before splattering violently across the glass, streaking down to floor in jagged lines that mirrored her rage. Amanda crossed her arms, her stance rigid, her eyes narrowed like daggers as she glared down at him. "Now clean again," she snapped, her tone sharp enough to cut metal. Jordan, who had spent his entire life learning the value of patience and observation, took a slow breath, his mind cataloging every detail, from the expensive shoes of the executives walking by to the subtle smirks of the interns pretending not to stare, knowing full well that none of this was about glass or coffee. It was about hierarchy, power, and who had the audacity to exist in a place where their color and background made them invisible. If you believe everyone should be treated with respect, no matter who they are or what their skin looks like, click the subscribe button now and tell us where you're watching from, because what happened next is the kind of story that forces you to question the structures we accept as normal. It was an early morning at Kingsley Enterprises, a multi-million-dollar corporation known for its sprawling real estate empire, high-end investments, and operations that seemed untouchable in the city skyline. The building itself rose like a monument to capitalism, glass reflecting the dawn light and casting long shadows over the bustling streets below, where employees in crisp suits, carrying briefcases that probably cost more than a month's salary for some, rushed in with their perfectly rehearsed expressions of urgency, sipping overpriced coffee and exchanging nods that conveyed importance, but rarely warmth. Jordan Carter's motorbike cut a stark contrast through the air, the engine slicing to the polished silence of the corporate world. He parked, swung a worn-out backpack over one shoulder, and stepped off, his hoodie and dark jeans simple, understated, almost deliberately unremarkable to the world. He looked like nothing special, just another face in a crowd of those trying to make it. But what no one yet knew, not a single soul in the lobby, was that Jordan was not a nobody. He was a firstborn son of Robert Kingsley, the billionaire owner of the very empire he had just entered, the rightful heir whose education, travels, and experiences abroad had molded him into a man who could one day command the entire corporation. Today, however, he chose invisibility, to walk among the people who worked for his father as if he were like them, to see the company through the unfiltered lens of someone with no title, no privileges, no preconceived assumptions in his favor. For years, Jordan had been abroad, learning, growing, becoming the kind of man his late black mother, whose legacy was mostly absent from the corporate history, would have been proud to see. His father, a white man, had remarried, and life at Kingsley Enterprises had continued under the administration of others who claimed loyalty to the company, but seemed to operate on rules written in invisible ink, rules that dictated whose voices mattered, whose efforts were celebrated, and whose presence was tolerated, or worse, ignored. Rumors of discrimination had reached Jordan from multiple sources. Whispers of minorities overlooked for promotions, stories of employees who were subtly, yet unmistakably, treated as second class, and had come today to confirm them for himself. As he approached the entrance, adjusting his backpack, he immediately felt the weight of stares. Employees in tailored suits and polished shoes turned their heads to look, confusion and curiosity flickering across their faces. Two receptionists exchanged subtle glances, their perfectly manicured hands hovering over keyboards as if they had rehearsed this reaction to someone who clearly did not belong. And then there was Kevin Matthews, a senior manager whose very posture seemed to exude the authority he believed came with his role, a man tall and stocky with slick-back hair and a self-important sneer. Kevin prided himself on the company's standards, a concept in his mind that meant keeping the office an exclusive club, a showcase of conformity, and in his eyes, Jordan did not fit the picture. Jordan paused briefly, feeling Kevin's gaze like a physical weight, the smirk slowly spreading across the man's face as he stepped forward. "Hey, human, deliveries go to back," he said, each word dripping with assumed superiority. Jordan's chest tightened slightly, the first real sign that this was going to be more than an ordinary morning. He turned slowly to meet Kevin's smug expression, letting the words settle. Have you ever walked into a place where, before you could even speak, people had already decided who you were and what you were worth? Drop a comment if you've ever felt that sting, that invisible barrier that assumes your presence is a mistake, a joke, a disruption. Jordan could have revealed who he was in that moment, declared his lineage, called out the hypocrisy, but he chose not to. Instead, he smiled slowly, a knowing, quiet smile that hinted at a storm behind calm eyes. Actually, he said casually, adjusting his backpack, I'm not here for a delivery. I was wondering if there were any job openings. I'm in dire need of a job, sir. Kevin raised an eyebrow, surveying Jordan from head to toe as if he were inspecting a stain on an expensive rug, a living contradiction to the office's polished image. The employees nearby chuckled, a few whispering behind their hands, the sound like distant wind through empty corridors, amused that someone so casually dressed, someone of Jordan's color, would dare to step into Kingsley Enterprises seeking a position. Kevin folded his arms, his voice dripping with disbelief. A job? He snorted. You want to work here? Jordan nodded, keeping his expression neutral, the calmness of his demeanor contrasting sharply with Kevin's agitated posture. Yeah, he said, simply yes. I'm looking for an opportunity. Kevin let out a mocking laugh, turning away dismissively, assuming the interaction was over, that the conversation had ended. But Jordan did not move. Are you sure? He pressed, his tone mild, almost polite, but layered with the weight of persistence. I'll take anything, any available position. Kevin exhaled sharply, a sound of exaggerated impatience, his body language screaming that entertaining Jordan's audacity was beneath him. Around them, the office continued its symphony of muted clicks, low murmurs, and the occasional laugh. But for Jordan, every detail mattered. The subtle eye rolls, the way the interns whispered and nudged each other, the way Amanda had thrown the coffee without consequence, and the silent complicity that allowed microaggressions to flourish unchecked. Jordan knew this world intimately, but today he was here not to wield power but to witness, to understand the invisible lines that divided his father's empire, to see firsthand how those who didn't fit the ideal were treated. Reflecting their biases and discomfort, Kevin, sensing a threat to his carefully constructed hierarchy, stepped in closer, blocking Jordan's path. But Jordan did not flinch. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, a subtle invitation for confrontation, and said softly, I'm serious about this. Any position, any work. Kevin's smirk faltered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features. The man who believed he controlled the narrative in this building suddenly realized that Jordan's calm persistence was not ordinary. It carried authority, even if unclaimed, and it unsettled him. Around them, whispers grew louder, curiosity spreading like wildfire, as employees speculated about this new janitor, unaware that he carried the bloodline of the very empire they served. Jordan felt the tension in the room, a mix of latent fear, unspoken prejudice, and all that no one could articulate, but everyone could feel. He paused, letting the silence stretch, letting the unspoken questions linger in the air. Who was he? Why was he here? And most importantly, what would he do next? Amanda, still watching, felt a pang of confusion. She expected submission, fear, or hesitation, but all she saw was controlled confidence, a presence that refused to be diminished by the casual cruelty that defined her mornings. Kevin, now visibly rattled, opened his mouth to dismiss Jordan again, to enforce the invisible rules of exclusion. But something in Jordan's eyes, a quiet storm of intelligence, patience, and inherited authority, made him hesitate. Around them, the office hummed with the energy of people who believed they understood the world, but who had no idea that today they were witnessing the subtle unveiling of someone who could change everything they thought they knew. Jordan's journey through the lobby was more than a physical passage. It was a traversal through prejudice, hierarchy, and the unspoken power structures that governed Kingsley Enterprises. Each step was measured, deliberate, a choreography of observation and subtle influence. The whispers grew louder and the stares more pointed, as employees instinctively recognized that something was different, though they could not name it. Jordan reached the main hallway, lined with glass offices and conference rooms, each a showcase of wealth and status. He passed by a meeting in progress, where executives in tailored suits argued over market shares and client acquisitions, their voices high-pitched and competitive. Jordan's eyes scanned the room, noting the dominance of certain faces, the exclusion of others, and invisible boundaries that dictated who could sit at the table and who was relegated to the margins. Amanda followed him silently now, the coffee incident momentarily forgotten, replaced by a dawning recognition that Jordan was not like anyone else they had hired, nor anyone they expected to encounter. Jordan stopped briefly at the window, looking down at the city streets below, the sun reflecting off the glass towers, a metaphor for the mirror world he was navigating, polished on the outside, but layered with unseen pressures, biases, and hierarchies. Kevin, finally regaining a semblance of composure, attempted once more to assert dominance, placing a hand on Jordan's shoulder in a gesture meant to redirect, to intimidate, to remind him of his supposed place. Jordan's response was subtle, almost imperceptible. A tilt of the head, a controlled glance, a silent assertion that he was neither intimidated nor unaware of the dynamics at play. Around them, the office seemed to hold its breath, the usual buzz dimming slightly as curiosity and tension coalesced into a tangible force. Employees leaned slightly from behind their desks, watching, speculating, and waiting to see how this encounter would unfold. Jordan's calm presence, his deliberate patience, and the quiet authority of his demeanor began to unsettle the carefully constructed order that Kevin and others had maintained. The story of Kingsley Enterprises, a tale of wealth, power, and subtle prejudice, was about to confront the very principles it had built itself upon, and Jordan Carter, the son who had returned not to claim power but to observe, had positioned himself at the center of this storm, ready to witness, to challenge, and perhaps to change everything that had been taken for granted. He gestured toward a nearby receptionist, his smirk widening as if he were setting up the punchline of a cruel joke. "Hey, check the system. See if there's something suitable for him," Kevin said loudly enough for others nearby to hear, making sure the humiliation was public. The receptionist, a woman in a crisp blazer with her hair perfectly tied back, barely managed to hide her smirk as her long, manicured fingers tapped on the keyboard. She knew exactly what Kevin was doing. Everyone around them knew. They weren't checking to give Jordan a real opportunity. They were checking to see how low they could drag him while still pretending to act professional. After a few moments, the receptionist looked up, her lips twisting into a grin. "Well, there's one position available," she said, glancing at Kevin with a look that confirmed they were both in on the mockery. Kevin's smirk deepened. "Oh, yeah? What is it?" The receptionist let out a small, condescending chuckle, the kind that dripped with superiority. "The janitorial team is hiring." For a moment, the air was thick with silent amusement, a cruel kind of laughter that didn't need sound to cut. Kevin turned back to Jordan, his smirk widening like a predator circling its prey. "So what do you say? You want an opportunity, right?" Jordan tilted his head slightly, pretending to consider, though inside he already knew his answer. He could feel the weight of the moment, the eyes staring at him, the quiet laughter that buzzed around the room like static, the unspoken assumption that he was desperate, worthless, and small. And in that moment, he made his choice. With a calm nod, he smiled, "I'll take it." Kevin blinked, his smirk faltering for just a second, as if he had misheard. "What?" Jordan repeated himself louder, his voice steady, his eyes unwavering. "I'll take it." Kevin burst out laughing. doubling over, unable to contain his disbelief, and the other employees watching joined in, shaking their heads, amused that this man had actually accepted a janitor job. They thought it was the ultimate humiliation, the final confirmation that he was beneath them. And yet Jordan didn't flinch. He didn't look embarrassed. He didn't even look angry. He just smiled, because what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was that they had just given the next CEO of Kingsley Enterprises a front row seat to witness exactly how deep their discrimination ran. They had no idea who they were talking to, and soon enough, they were about to find out, because things were about to get very, very interesting. You would think that after securing a job, things would start getting better, that maybe the hostility would ease, that people would give him at least a shred of respect. But for Jordan Carter, the real test was only beginning. Imagine stepping into a place where everyone assumes you are beneath them. Imagine working in an environment where every word, every glance, and every breath is a reminder that you are unwelcome. Have you ever had a job where someone treated you unfairly just because of who you are? Where no matter what you did, it was never enough? Drop a comment if you've ever been in that situation, because what happens next in this story is a kind of injustice that will make your blood boil. And if you're already hooked, smash that subscribe and like button, because you won't believe what happened next. So there he was, Jordan Carter, the secret heir to Kingsley Enterprises, standing in a janitor's uniform holding a mop and bucket, his reflection shimmering faintly in the polished marble floors, his presence almost invisible in a sea of expensive suits and designer handbags. He had been working for less than an hour when it became clear he was not welcome here. The floors of the building gleamed under expensive chandeliers, polished for decades by generations of workers who had passed through before him. But none of those workers, not a single one, had ever been the CEO in disguise. None had ever carried the silent power to change the fate of the entire empire. And yet no one in the building saw him as anything more than a janitor. No one, that is, except his new supervisor, Amanda Whitmore. Amanda was blonde, tall, with a sharp, permanent scowl etched into her face, the kind of expression that told you she enjoyed her small slice of authority far more than was healthy. She had worked at Kingsley Enterprises for years, and she was proud of her position, too proud, because in her mind she had power over those beneath her, and she wielded it like a weapon. To Jordan, she made it clear from the very first day that she believed he belonged at the bottom. It started immediately. "Hey, you." Amanda's sharp voice echoed through the hallway, sharp and jagged like broken glass. Jordan, mop in hand, turned to see her marching toward him, her glare cold and unforgiving. "What do you think you're doing?" She snapped. Jordan glanced down at the mop, then back up at her. Mopping?" Amanda's eyes narrowed. "Don't get smart with me. I don't like your kind thinking you can act all high and mighty around here. Your kind." Two words, venomous, loaded, spoken with the casual cruelty of someone who thought they were untouchable. Jordan just smiled, his calmness unsettling her, because he wanted to see how deep this woman's disrespect ran. And no, it ran deep. Amanda didn't just dislike Jordan. She despised him, resented him, and she made it her personal mission to show it at every opportunity. If he mopped the hallway, it wasn't good enough. If he wiped down a desk, it was streaky. If he emptied a trash bin, he was too slow. It didn't matter what he did. Amanda found something to complain about, and she didn't just correct him. She humiliated him loudly in front of everyone. "Are you stupid?" She sneered one afternoon as Jordan finished cleaning the executive lounge, her voice carrying across the polished walls. Jordan, calm as ever, set down his rag. "Did I do something wrong?" Amanda rolled her eyes dramatically, turning to a few employees nearby who were already watching. Did you do something wrong? She mocked, her voice laced with fake incredulity, laughing cruelly. Oh, I don't know. Maybe the fact that you left streaks on the table. Look at this. She pointed at an invisible flaw in the glass, her finger jabbing at the surface as though it were the ultimate proof of his incompetence. The employees nearby chuckled, some out of amusement, some out of discomfort, but none dared to intervene. That was how it was at Kingsley Enterprises. Silence in the face of injustice was the unspoken rule. Jordan stood there unbothered, his calmness a shield against her venom, his silence a quiet defiance. Because while Amanda thought she was breaking him down, what she was really doing was giving him priceless insight into how deeply the company culture had rotted, how normalized cruelty had become, how easily power was abused when no one was watching, or at least when they thought no one important was watching. And Jordan was watching. He was taking notes, not on paper, but in his mind, cataloging every insult, every act of disrespect, every mocking laugh, because one day soon those notes would become evidence of who truly belonged in the company he would inherit and who did not. Amanda's tirades continued day after day. Sometimes she threw things, like the time she spilled coffee on the counter just to make him clean it again, sneering at him as though he were dirt. Sometimes she insulted him directly, questioning his intelligence, his work ethic, even his presence in the building. And sometimes, the worst times, she didn't need to say anything at all. She simply looked at it with that expression of disdain, that look that said, "You don't belong here." But Jordan, the man they thought was powerless, endured all with the patience of someone who knew his time was coming. The deeper he sank into the role of the janitor, the more he uncovered about the hidden truths of Kingsley Enterprises. The quiet racism that lingered in the halls, the nepotism that elevated the undeserving, the hypocrisy of a company that displayed diversity posters in the lobby while allowing supervisors like Amanda to run rampant. Kevin, too, made sure to stop by now and then, smirking at Jordan, offering mocking advice, pretending to be helpful while dripping with sarcasm. "Hey, don't forget to scrub under the tables," Matthews would say loudly, so everyone could hear. "We wouldn't want our investors thinking we tolerate dirt in this company." And every time, Jordan smiled, nodded, and complied, not because he was weak, but because he was strong enough to wait, strong enough to endure, strong enough to watch them dig their own graves with their arrogance. For weeks this continued, Amanda's cruelty intensifying, Kevin's arrogance growing, the employees' complicity solidifying into a culture of silence. And all the while, Jordan played his role, the janitor who nodded, who mopped, who scrubbed, who endured. But beneath the uniform, beneath the mop and bucket, there burned a fire, a storm waiting to break, a truth waiting to be revealed. They thought they were humiliating him. They thought they were proving he was beneath them. But what they were really doing was setting the stage for their downfall, handing the rightful heir to the empire every piece of evidence he needed to expose the rot festering at the heart of Kingsley Enterprises. And when the day came, and it would come, when Jordan Carter stood before them not as the janitor they mocked, but as the CEO they now answered to, the shock would shake the building to its very foundations, and every cruel word, every mocking laugh, every act of disrespect would come back to haunt them in ways they could never imagine. Ethan Cole never imagined that walking into a glass-covered skyscraper on a humid Monday morning would become the beginning of a storm that would change not just his own life, but the entire foundation of a company built on arrogance, greed, and prejudice. Yet that is exactly how it happened. And while everyone else believed they were looking at just another desperate man begging for work, they were unknowingly staring at the man who would soon own everything around them, because Ethan Cole was not what he seemed, And the cruel lesson the world inside Sterling and Company was about to learn would be carved into their memory forever. It all started when Ethan, in a plain gray shirt and worn shoes, approached the receptionist's desk, clutching a small envelope of documents. His calm voice carrying the weight of quiet determination. "Excuse me, I was told there might be an opening here," he said. The receptionist, a young woman named Clarissa, with manicured nails and a tone dripping with condescension, raised an eyebrow as if offended he had even dared to speak. Without bothering to hide her smirk, she leaned back and called out across the lobby, "Mr. Donovan, we've got someone here asking for work." From the upper landing of the marble staircase strode Marcus Donovan, mid-40s, slicked hair, a tailored suit that screamed wealth, and eyes that carried the sharpness of a man who thrived on belittling others. Marcus descended slowly like a king approaching a beggar, his lips curling into a smile that wasn't a smile at all. Well, what do we have here?" he sneered. "I assume you're lost, son." Ethan stood tall, though his appearance betrayed no signs of wealth or power. "I was told there may be an opportunity, any position. I'm willing to work." Marcus chuckled, darkly glancing Clarissa, then at the employees who had started gathering just to watch the show. Hear that, everyone? Willing to work. The lobby filled with quiet laughter. Marcus tilted his head, mocking. "Curiosity. Let's see if our system has something fitting for a man like you. Clarissa, play along." Clarissa tapped the keyboard slowly, biting her lip to contain her laughter until at last she grinned. "Oh, there's one position open, sir," she said, letting the word "sir" drip with sarcasm. Marcus's eyes lit up. "Do tell, janitorial," Clarissa replied, unable to hold back her chuckle. The crowd tittered. Marcus smirked and turned back to Ethan. "Well, there you have it. A mop, a bucket, and a chance to make yourself useful. What do you say?" Ethan's eyes didn't flicker. His posture remained calm, though the atmosphere thickened with ridicule. "I'll take it," he said. Marcus blinked surprise, then burst out laughing. "You'll what?" "I'll take it," Ethan repeated louder, his voice steady. The laughter around the lobby swelled. Employees shook their heads, whispering at the absurdity. A grown man with enough dignity to stand tall, reduced to cleaning floors. And yet Ethan didn't flinch, didn't break. He only smiled, because what none of them knew was that Ethan Cole was a hidden son of Arthur Sterling, the billionaire founder of Sterling and Company, and every insult hurled at him that day was another nail in the coffin of their careers. For now, though he wore the uniform of janitor, navy blue with a name patch stitched above the chest, mop in hand, buckets squeaking across the marble, the chandeliers above reflected on the polished floor, as if mocking him with their brilliance. And no, one was quicker to seize the chance to remind him of his supposed place than his new supervisor, Victoria Hale, a tall, sharp-tongued woman with bleached blonde hair, icy blue eyes, and a permanent sneer that could cut glass. She spotted him cleaning the main corridor and pounced. "Hey, you." Her voice cracked like a whip. Ethan turned slowly, mop in hand. "Yes, ma'am. Don't get smart with me." Victoria snapped. "What do you think you're doing?" Ethan blinked, glanced at the mop, then back at her. "Cleaning." Victoria crossed her arms, scowling. "Don't try to act clever. I don't like your type thinking you belong here." "My type," Ethan said calmly, her lip curled lazy, undeserving. "The ones who think they can slide in here and be treated equal. Newsflash, you're not." Ethan smiled faintly, filing away every word. She barked criticisms over nothing. Streaks on glass. Bins not emptied fast enough. Floors too wet. Floors too dry. Each command louder than necessary so nearby employees could hear. "Are you slow?" She jeered one afternoon while Ethan finished the executive lounge. Ethan set down the rag quietly. "Did I do something wrong?" Victoria mocked his tone, turning to the onlookers. Did he do something wrong? Maybe being blind, maybe being useless. Laughter echoed. Ethan's silence only fueled her cruelty, and soon Marcus Donovan reappeared in the picture, prowling the halls like a wolf, throwing candy wrappers on the ground just after Ethan cleaned, spilling coffee intentionally, sneering every time. "Look at you," Marcus would say, crossing his arms. "Found your true calling having you boy." The word boy hissed like venom. Some employees laughed. Others stayed silent. A few, however, watched Ethan carefully, noticing his calmness, his confidence, the way his eyes seemed to study everything like a man preparing for something larger. Suspicion grew quietly, but the abuse never slowed, until one day Victoria Hale took it too far. Ethan had just polished the executive conference table when Victoria stormed in, heels clacking. "What is this?" she barked, pointing at the gleaming glass. Ethan blinked. "It's the table." She scoffed dramatically. "This is filthy. Are you blind?" Ethan glanced at the shine. "I just cleaned it." Victoria sneered. "You miss a spot." Then in a single motion she grabbed a full mug of coffee and hurled it across the table, liquid splattering everywhere, dripping to the carpet. "Now clean it again." Silence dropped heavy across the floor. Employees froze mid, steps staring wide-eyed. Ethan inhaled slowly and smiled, not from joy, but from knowing the time was near, because soon Marcus, Victoria, Clarissa, and every cruel laugh in that building would be silenced forever. And right then the receptionist's phone rang. Clarissa answered cheerfully until her face drained pale. She stammered nervously, "Yes, sir, of course," right away. She hung up trembling, whispering to Marcus, "Mr. Arthur Sterling is on his way." Scrambled to organize files. Secretaries whispered frantically, and Marcus Donovan's heart leapt. This was his chance, he thought. Finally a moment to impress the man at the top, perhaps even secure his promotion. Marcus barely spared a glance at Ethan the janitor, for to him Ethan was nothing, background, invisible. But as the elevator dinged and the doors slid open, reality began its march. Arthur Sterling emerged, tall, commanding, dressed in a gray suit that exuded power. His presence sucked the air from the room. Employees bowed heads slightly. Executives practically salivated for attention. Marcus strode forward, beaming. "Sir, welcome. What an honor." Arthur's eyes scanned the lobby cold. "Where is he?" Marcus blinked. "Where is who, sir? My son." Arthur said flatly. Marcus's smile faltered. "Your son, yes, he's here," Arthur replied. "And if I find out anyone in this building has mistreated him, there will be consequences you cannot begin to fathom." The lobby froze. Whispers rippled. Marcus's confidence cracked. He stuttered. "But, sir, who—" Arthur turned his gaze, scanning faces, until it landed on Ethan standing calm, mop in hand, uniform wrinkled yet posture regal. "There you are." Arthur's voice softened into something almost fatherly. Ethan walked forward, each step echoing like thunder across marble. Employees gawked, mouths open. Marcus's face drained of color. Clarissa nearly collapsed behind the desk. Victoria's lips trembled, though she tried to maintain composure. Ethan stopped beside Arthur, who placed a proud hand on his shoulder. "Allow me to introduce Ethan Cole Sterling, my son, the rightful heir to this company." The silence cracked like glass shattering, gasps, muffled screams, executives exchanging terrified glances, Marcus stammering incoherently, Victoria whispering no, no, no. Arthur's tone hardened like steel. "I have heard reports already of how my son has been treated undercover in this very building. Every insult, every humiliation, every act of cruelty. And I will tell you this, anyone who has shown their true colors against it will not see another sunrise employed here." Marcus tried desperately. "Sir, please, this is a misunderstanding. I didn't know." Arthur's eyes cut through him like knives. "Ignorance is no defense. Arrogance is no shield. You mock my heir. You disgrace this company's values, security." Marcus flailed as guard approached. "Wait, please. I've been loyal. I deserve a chance." Ethan finally spoke, his voice calm, but Powerful. Loyalty to cruelty is no loyalty at all, Marcus. You had your chance. Now it's over. Marcus was dragged away, shouting in vain. Victoria stepped forward, trembling. Mrs. Sterling. Arthur snapped. Silence. You threw coffee at my son. You spat on his work. You humiliated him in front of others. What does that say about you? Victoria shook her head, tears brimming. I was only doing my job. Ethan's voice cut her off. No. You were feeding your ego, and now you will feed the unemployment. Line security. Victoria's pleas dissolved into sobs as she was taken. Clarissa cowered at the desk. Arthur's glare pinned her. Receptionist. You enjoyed mocking him as well, didn't you? Clarissa stammered. I didn't mean... Ethan raised a hand, stopping her words. Save it. Action spoke louder than your laughter ever could. You're finished. The building buzzed with shock. Employees who had stayed silent in the face of cruelty now whispered apologies. Others bowed their heads in shame. Yet a few, who had watched Ethan with suspicion, now realized their instinct were right, and they would be rewarded for their quiet integrity. Arthur announced firmly, Today this company changes. My son will be shadowing me until he takes his rightful place as CEO, and those who showed kindness or at least respect will remain. Those who fail will be purged. Make no mistake, Sterling and Company will never again tolerate arrogance dressed as professionalism. Ethan glanced around at the faces, some pale, some hopeful, some ashamed, and his smile returned, not the quiet smile of endurance, but a victorious smile of a man who had walked through fire and emerged unburned, because they had thought they were hiring a janitor, but what they had truly done was hand the throne to a king in disguise. And from that day forward, the name Ethan Cole Sterling was etched not just into the glass doors of the skyscraper, but into the memory of every single person who had ever dared to underestimate him.